Welcome everybody to the webinar today. Great to see that we've got a good group of people interested and keen to find out more about Strato. I will be moderating today. My name is Brendan Andrews-Warmoth. I'm the Head of Product Enablement and Delivery for Spinifex IT. I'm joined by my colleague Abhishek, or Abby. Abby will be taking us through the demo of the system. He's really our expert when it comes to building and delivering Strato solutions, so he'll be taking us through that. Our webinar today is you'll see the title here, leveraging smart document automation and storage to transform your people operations. So we're going to take you through quite a lot of content today around what can Strato do as a complete package, how it can help your business, and hopefully bring some really interesting insights and information across into your day today. A little bit about today's webinar. So the webinar is of course being recorded. That means mainly that if you want to, you'll get to access the recording after the session. You'll be able to rewatch it. If you miss anything, don't worry. If you need to jump out and jump back in, don't worry, you'll get the recording afterwards. Obviously, we have consented to be recorded by being hosting this webinar. Just to also let you know, the attendees are muted, so you'll only hear myself and Abby throughout the presentation. If you do want to submit a question, therefore, please use the Q&A function. Those will pop up and I'll do my best to address the easy questions or the smaller questions as we go through. And we do have some time set aside at the end to cover off anything that I'm not able to kind of quickly answer while we're going through. Like I said already, the recording will be sent across. So for anybody who's registered, and including especially those folks who are here today, you'll see that in your inbox in the following week. So let's get into it. What have we got today's session? So a quick overview of our agenda. We want to talk to kind of the key points of the Strato solution, not just document creation. It's a very important part, but also simplifying workflows, managing documents in our Strato storage solution, as well as bringing documents into Strato, so streamlining the collection management of documents in a single place. And of course, really a core capability for us, or a core message for us, is enhancing your data security and compliance requirements using the Strato solution. Like I said, we do have a little bit of time at the end for a Q&A. So we'll try to save some time there, but of course, please feel free to write those messages throughout the session. Even if we don't get to them in time, we will at least have them all, and we'll make sure that we answer all those questions and send out that Q&A after the session as well. So if there's anything that gets missed, we'll definitely make sure we follow that up for everybody as well. So really what we want to talk about in the first place is to start with, not directly into the solution, but talk about what are the challenges that we see our customers facing, or all customers facing, as it relates to document automation. There's a lot of challenges that we see really around, basically the biggest one I think is most common is so much manual effort. You've got a really great solution with SuccessFactors, SAP SuccessFactors, but there's things missing. There's certain processes, there's certain things that you have to do very manually. That requires a lot of time. It opens you up to human error. It could cause all kinds of different problems within the business. There's of course then some what I might call like softer things. So things like, you really want to have a consistent brand within your organization. You want to have good content that you provide to your employees. You want your employees to have a good experience with the system, as well as with your customers, right? So that the employees get good documents, that they can interact with the system, that they have a good experience. Oftentimes we see one of the key questions that comes up from our customers is, yes, we have these workflows, it's really great, that brings a lot of automation, but what do we do when those workflows bottleneck, sitting with someone for a very long time? Can we send them reminders? Can we escalate those workflows automatically, bring some more automation and some more capability into our workflow processes? It's an important one. And of course, what I mentioned earlier is we see this very often, all kinds of different compliance risks. Do we have documents sitting down on our local computers? Do we have paper floating around all over our desks or boxes full of documents in some offices I've been to? And making sure that we're reducing that risk and keeping a controlled document environment where all of those different documents live and are secured. Those are very common, I would say, across all of the customers that we speak to. We see these challenges, and that's how we've driven the build of our solution. So I'll talk a little bit as well. We talk there more about document generation, document automation. There's also, of course, a whole nother set of challenges as it relates to the document storage. So is it things like making sure that you're deleting the documents at the right time, putting them on hold or archiving them, expiring them at the right time? All of those different types of compliance requirements that we have when we're managing our employees' documents. Again, as usual, the manual effort of actually moving documents around and giving the right people access to them and things like that. Making sure that your security is not breached, making sure that only the right people see only the right documents at the right times. That's always a critical, important topic, and especially because you have such a well-built and secured process and system when you're using SAP SuccessFactors, but do you then have those same security processes and authorizations flowing through all of your other processes as well? Well, if you're putting PDF documents of employee contracts on your laptop, then obviously not. So really making sure that we cover all those security requirements. Giving accessibility to different documents, not just for the employee themselves, which is also very important, employee self-service, managers, and also HR admins within the team. It was a really insightful to see, especially in the last few years, how quickly that has become a really important message for businesses who want to operate like we do remotely. How do you access an employee's contract that's sitting on a piece of paper in a box somewhere when you're working remotely all the time from home? Well, you need to have that online accessibility. You need to have a system that enables your teams as well as your employees and your managers to actually access those documents when they need them. And of course, operational overheads, I think that's a clear one, especially as it relates to non-cloud systems or as it relates to keeping big boxes full of paper everywhere. How do you make sure that you're getting the best out of the different environments that you have, the different systems that you have available to you in the cloud, and obviously using SAP SuccessFactors and Strato. So that was a little bit about, I guess, the challenges. We always like to start by showing, we understand that's where we see those challenges. We spend a lot of time talking to our customers about those challenges, understanding those challenges across the market. And that brings us then to the solution. So we have built a solution with Strato, and it's based on those challenges we've seen our customers facing. The key thing I think that we like to message here, you'll see, is the solution Strato is all about spending less time managing your documents, more time managing your people, spending less time manually creating documents out of Word or printing things out and posting them to employees. All of those types of things really reduce that amount of time and effort, manual effort, and increase the amount of effectiveness you get out of your systems now. So to give you a quick overview, what is Strato? Some of you may already know about it, I hope so. Some of you might be very new. Strato is a fully cloud-based solution that was built with SAP SuccessFactors in mind, so very tightly integrated with SAP SuccessFactors, and really was built to support customers with those requirements they need to have better employee document lifecycle processes. That's not just necessarily generating a document, but also having better document workflows, having better storage of those documents, having better security and compliance processes around employee documents, all of those things that come in together when you start to talk about employee document lifecycle. Strato is a very robust system. It's something we built from the ground up, like I said, with SuccessFactors in mind. We host it. It's a cloud-based solution. That means it's very scalable. It can be used by any customer, any size. We've got some very smaller customers. I wouldn't say very small customers, of course, and some very large customers. and the system really is built that it is usable and scalable and helps all of those customers along the way in different ways. Click to the next slide. The Strato suite, I guess we call it here. I like to always look at it again. I've said this before, with success factors at the core. There are a number of different parts of Strato that all come together to provide that real employee life cycle, like I mentioned. If I go around the circle, I'll mention a few of those different key components. You'll hear that, and we'll sort of repeat that throughout the messaging. The first one is really Strato Documents. Strato Documents was built to help us create those dynamic documents from your SuccessFactors data. So whether it's employment agreements, pay increases, compensation information, all of those different types of documents that an employee needs throughout their working day can be generated using the Strato Documents module. It's a very powerful solution, and it's very capable in terms of what it can do. The second one is Strato Forms. Strato Forms is a solution that we built to really bring the ability to capture data into the Strato system to also be used in the documents. It allows us to do things like sending a form to an employee, filling out some information into the form. They say, oh yes, my bank account is this, that, and the other thing. And then we use that information either in the generation of a document, we can write it back into SuccessFactors, or we use it in different decisions without our workflow process. It really allows more interaction with the system and allows us to then drive different processes in the Strato suite as well. The third one is Strato Automate. Strato Automate is our workflow solution, so it's our own workflow engine within the Strato suite. It allows us to streamline the processes that you need around those documents, so allowing things like digital signatures to be requested. I mentioned earlier, what happens when a workflow gets stuck? We can escalate that to somebody else. We can send a reminder to the right person. We have a lot of capability in that Strato Automate solution. And ultimately, of course, using that to then store the documents into the Strato storage solution as well. The fourth one is Strato Sign. That's our own built-in digital signature solution. That's part of the Strato Automate package. That means we can track and request digital signatures from anybody in the organization at any time onto those documents or onto those forms that we were talking about earlier. So sending out a form and asking an employee to fill out some information is number one, but of course then also requesting that they sign off and approve that that was actually the right provided information at the bottom, giving us an auditable way to find out, okay, who approved that, who was working on those different documents, and what different approvals did they go through. The last part is Strato Storage. That's our secure storage that allows us to store any employee documents into Strato. Of course, we talked about generating documents and forms, so primarily we start to store those same forms and same documents we generated into Strato Storage, but we can also use it to store any other employee documents as well. We see very often documents coming from somewhere else in SuccessFactors, documents coming from our employee central payroll system, for example, into the storage, to have a consolidated place, one-stop shop for all of those employee documents, where we can then have secure employee self-service, manager self-service information, and so on and so on. That's the suite. Let's dive in a little bit more about each of those different elements. I mentioned the document generation first. Really, that is at the core of Strato, one of the most powerful features that we have. We've built this up over a long period of time based on the customer requirements that we've seen, and really given you a lot of capability in how do you generate those really nice looking documents with all the right information. Those are, I think, the two most important points. Do the documents look good? We obviously want to have a good experience for our employees. We want to make sure that we have the right employer branding. We want to make sure that everything comes out in the right format, et cetera, et cetera. And at the same time, on the other side, we want to make sure is all of the right information in that document. So things like having real-time access to data from SAP SuccessFactors or the payroll system as well. Pulling that data into this document, not just as different fields, but also using it to guide which sections of that document are shown. Having reusable sections, meaning we don't have to build the same content over and over again. We can have a header, a letterhead that has different logos for different parts of the business. We can reuse that across all of our document templates for a nice consistent approach and to reduce our manual effort when we have to build new document templates. We can have editable sections, for example, where I've generated a document and almost everything in that document is locked down because it's information from SuccessFactors, it's legal requirements, etc. But I still have a little bit of flexibility around, well, I need to add often some information into this one part, and I can do that directly into the document while I'm making the approval of that document as well. Really giving a very complete package around how do we want to generate those documents? How do we want to make sure we have all the right information and all the right branding across those documents as well? Last point you'll see there, I think, is also important is around the digital signatures I mentioned already. Our built-in digital signature solution, Strato Sign, or we often work with some of the big names like DocuSign or Adobe Sign, or even some smaller, more local providers as well. So onto the document automation. Once we have those generated documents, of course, what should we do with them? Oftentimes there's some kind of approval process, there's different workflows that are required. I think the example that you can see here, we're generating a document, we're sending it across to various people for approval. Maybe one of them sending it back to request a change, maybe one of them sending it on to someone else. They have different reminders if they haven't taken action at the right time, and so on. The workflow builder in Strato really allows you to build out exactly how you want to have those processes, gives a lot of flexibility into the different document generation processes you need, especially because we also have extensibility there, allowing us to integrate with third-party systems via APIs, allowing us to make all kinds of different calls or decisions within that system as well. As an example, here's a nice screenshot of also how we work alongside the SuccessFactors workflow. So one very common question when people see that we have our own workflow engine, they say, is it a replacement to SuccessFactors or is it on top? And I always like to think about it working together. This example here gives us a really great example around a SuccessFactors Employee Central workflow. So very commonly you see, okay, someone needs to take an action in Employee Central. Maybe I'm moving an employee to a new position, for example. As soon as that happens, there's a workflow in Employee Central that's sent to the manager for approval. They say, yes, okay, that's good, let's go ahead. That goes across to the People Services team. They need to take some action. Now, their step in the Employee Central workflow is just one step, but actually they need to go away. They need to generate the contract. They need to review that. They need to get the approval from the right people, request the digital signatures, and ultimately they need to store that document somewhere secure. So all of that is happening on the Strato side. And then in the end, when that entire process has finished, it flows back to the SuccessFactors workflow. So you have your SuccessFactors workflow still maintaining the control of the overall process, but with those extra steps and with that extra capability delivered by the Strato workflow solution. And lastly, just to talk a little bit more around the Strato storage. Really, it's a very flexible solution. So it allows for all kinds of folder structures, different categorizations of the documents, different metadata storage, and all of the type of document storage that you need. Very important, I mentioned already around the retention policies for automatically deleting documents, archiving documents, expiring documents, etc. And of course, authorizations. What's, I think, most important for us is to make sure that we respect the authorizations, work within the authorizations framework of SuccessFactors. But of course, we then have on top of that everything we need to be able to do in the Strato system itself. So yes, I might have access to a specific employee in SuccessFactors, but am I allowed to see their contract and any warning letters and any promotion letters, etc., or do I need to have a more limited view? The example we're seeing here on these screenshots is basically a little bit about Strato storage as an administrator view, as an employee self-service view on a mobile phone, and then finally, and again, a bit more of an administrator view where we have a very powerful search engine within Strato, allows us to find and review all of the documents we need in a very easy way. So I've talked quite a bit theoretically to start with, and at this point I would hand over to Abby, who will take us through the practical side and show us a little bit how does Strato actually work, what does it look like in the system, and I'll hand it over to you, Abby.
Thanks, Brendan. So hello, everyone. As Brendan mentioned, now I'm going to walk you through uh, the demo side of things. So all the scenarios that we talked about before, now we will see how that's being replicated in the system, what are all the different things to look for, and we can go from there. So before I do that, let me share my screen. I hope everybody can see my screen now. Okay. So, um, so today for this webinar, we were looking at a couple of important scenarios that we can talk about. So basically, we were looking at three different scenarios. So we will go through that one by one. So first scenario that I wanted to talk about was the candidate offer letters. So more often than not, we always get this requirement from the customer saying, hey, the current document generation capabilities in SuccessFactors is limited. So how can Strato help us go through this? So for that particular scenario, for today's demo, we will go through the job offer. So when the candidate is going through the recruitment process, one of the important step during that process is generating the offer letter. So when generating this offer letter, so for this scenario, what we are going to see is the recruiter will complete the job offer and move it to generating the contract. And once that contract is generated, the recruiter will take a look at the offer letter, see the details, and make sure that the details that are coming, for example, from job application, any conditions regarding employment, that's something we will see is in place. And then if everything looks fine, then the recruiter would simply go ahead and send it to the hiring manager, and then followed by that, the signature happens. Brendan briefly mentioned about the part about using StratoSign, so we'll also get a glimpse of that. And then finally, the application being automatically uploaded in the applicant profile, and also how we can automate the process of making the candidate status that's currently in generate contract to accepted or rejected, depending on what the scenario is. So that is the scenario that I'll be walking you through now. So without further ado, let me go to my screen here. So Strato is tightly integrated with SuccessFactors. So as all of you must be quite familiar with the SuccessFactors page. So I won't really dwell too much time to go through what this is. So currently I have come as the recruiter because that's what the scenario is that we are going to demo. Now, for people who are familiar with SuccessFactors, as you know that all the recruiting applications or all the requisitions, to be precise, are currently in the recruiting page. So that's where we are. So for this demo, because we are going through the candidate applications, or this webinar is more dedicated to Europe, we would take the job requisition example of an candidates in Europe. So as I mentioned, right now we are currently in the job requisition, and when we go through the list of candidates, um, in case you are using an older version of the pipeline, you will see that now this is the latest version that SuccessFactors has given out. So that's what you are seeing here. And You can see that there are a list of candidates in different stages of their application. So for this demo, we will go to the candidates that are under offer. So let's say for the contract generation to happen, we have to move the candidate in a certain stage, right? So what we're going to do now is we will try to move these candidates in bulk. So what I'm going to do now is I select these candidates and then I simply move these candidates to the next stage, which is approved the generate contract stage, and then I will simply move them. One thing to note, of course, this must be also is I'm pretty obvious, I guess, is this is the demo system, so some of the requirements or some of the stage, the name of the stage where the applicant goes might differ depending on your requirement. But yeah, just wanted to call that out. So when we do this, I also wanted to quickly mention what is happening in the background. So let's say that these candidates are moved in this stage now. So what's happening, what Strato is doing in the backend is it first gets the or listens to this event from SuccessFactors saying that, hey, the candidates are moved to a certain stage in the application. So it would go ahead and generate the contract. So that's what it's doing in one end. And while we are here, one of the scenarios that I also wanted to talk about that's more specific to Europe, I guess, is the Workers' Council process. So we have also had situations where, hey, before the contract is even generated, could we add a scenario where Workers' Council approves or rejects the offer? Only then the contract is generated. So the answer to that question is yes. We've had a couple of customers who have asked this requirement, and we have also implemented that process where when a candidate is moved to a certain stage in the application and then the offer is generated, a form goes to the workers council, and then the workers council would look at the offer and say, okay, these details look all right, and only then after their approval we proceed to generate the contract. So that is also one of the most common scenarios that we have seen. That's also something that we have implemented with a couple of customer. But in this case, we are assuming that the Workers' Council has approved it. So that's why we directly moved into the contract generation process, because that's where our focus is at the moment. So now that the contract is generated, let's go ahead and see what happens. So now I switched the screen to the recruiter. So because the contract is generated, the recruiter should be intimated that, hey, now the contract is generated for those three candidates that we went through, and now they can go ahead and review the details coming from the application. So one thing that you also would have noticed here is that currently we just they don't have to log into Strato standalone, so you can just access Strato through the email where the applications or the offer contracts are being sent to them, and they can access them on the fly. Few things to talk about while we are looking at this contract is currently we are taking an example of one of the employees. So Mark Brown is one of the employee for whom we are looking the contract generated. As Brendan mentioned, you can see that the design, the compliance, the fonts, etc., some of these things that if that's of an utmost importance to your organization, we can of course cater to that as well. On top of it, there are also, we would use Strato signature for this. So I will briefly come to that. You might also notice there are certain sections that are marked green on the side. So they mean that those sections are editable. So one of the most common questions that we've also gotten is, hey, once we generate the contract from Strato, can we also make sure that there will be certain information that the recruiter or the HR can edit on the fly and only then send it to the employee? So we've had a couple of situations where where the customers wanted to do that, and that's what you are also seeing here. Another thing I want to show when I open probably another application is the difference between how the two applications are here. So what I'm going to do now is, yeah. So here you can see that this is, so for one employee currently, this is a temporary contract. So that's what you are seeing here. So that's why there is a date of expiry here. And there are certain conditions that are applicable when the employee is part-time. And on the other hand, if I show you this application, this is, let me try to make it more available. Yeah. So you can see this is a contract for an employee who is actually full time. So that's why you don't see like an end date to the contract, because this is more on the full time side. So based on the conditions, so that was one thing that I was talking about. Based on the conditions that we set, we can also generate the contract accordingly. Not just that. So if I compare this particular contract, you will see that because the employee is a full-time employee, they have a different set of benefits package because the employee is on a permanent contract. But in comparison, if I compare it with the other employee that we just talked about, you see, because it's a part-time employee, you do not see the benefit package. So the point being, depending on what conditions you have, what conditions you have based on the employment type or based on what benefits they have, we can also set conditions around that. So now going back to our example, let's say that, okay, everything in the contract looks okay to the recruiter, and then they can go ahead and approve. Now you see that we also have multiple options to do that. So for example, um, if it's not approved, they can also send it back to revise. I will briefly come to that when we go into the next stages. But for now, let's say that everything looks okay, and then the contract is sent further for the review for the hiring manager to go through it. So we had 3 employees. So let me go ahead and do that. So basically what we are doing here is, hey, all the details that are required for the contract generation is fine. And now we are simply approving them. So once what happens, the approval is done, is it goes to the part where the hiring manager will review the contract. So let's just go ahead and do that. So now that you see the contract is reviewed by the recruiter, and now we simply go ahead and come in as the hiring manager. So the hiring manager, what they would do here is they would, let me go here. Yeah. So the hiring manager would simply take a look at the contract and then see what needs to work from there. So let me first check the contract that we just generated now, and then we can go. Okay. So we currently have the link that is sent to the hiring manager. So the hiring manager would simply just access the contract now. So in this stage, what we are doing here is the hiring manager will take a look at the contract and say, okay, all the details that are here looks fine. Now they have 2 options. So one is either to accept and sign, or either to cancel the offer, saying, hey, there is something wrong with the contract, maybe we have to regenerate, or you could also simply send back. So first, let's take the happy case. So the happy case is everything is fine, and the hiring manager would look at the details and say, okay, I'm going to accept it. So this is where, as Brendan was mentioning, we are using Strato Sign. So this is a functionality just like other signature functionalities we have, like DocuSign or Adobe Sign. We also have Strato Sign, which has the similar functionalities that the others do. Now, of course, if there is a question that, hey, does Strato work with other, signature providers? So yeah, we work with all standard signature providers. We work with DocuSign, we work with Adobe Sign, and also in some cases we have worked with also the like a specific local signature providers as well. So as long as as long as there's a way to integrate it, we've also managed to work with those local providers as well. So uh, going back to our example, the demo right now, we have accepted one of the contract. So what we can do next is we can now go into the second contract that we had. And there, what we can do is we will simply try to reject this contract, or maybe we send back this contract. So let us try to do that for this example. So let me now go ahead and access the second contract. So as I mentioned, different contracts could have different use cases. So Mark Brown is the next example that we're talking about here. So in this case, let's say that, okay, there are some details that are missing in the contract, so maybe we have to revise it. So if that is the case, they can simply use the option to send back. Now, while sending back the contract, Strato also has the functionality to say, hey, do you want to add any extra comment there, like why you are sending back, so that the person who is reviewing, which is the recruiter in this case, is going to do the amendment. So let's say, as an example, why the contract was sent back was due to the fact that certain key details missing. Again, this is just an example. So we can also give them this option to add the comment. So that's what we are doing now. So when we select that option, what's happening here is the contract is simply being sent back. So we looked at two cases now. So one is the happy case where the contract was accepted or signed by the hiring manager. And now we also looked at the case when the contract was sent back. So in the case of the happy case, so to say, what happens next is the email then goes to the candidate, because once the hiring manager has signed it, then the candidate is the last person who will go ahead and sign the contract. So in this case, that's what we are doing now. So now you can see that the contract is sent to the employee here. So that's what you are seeing in this email. So the employee will simply select the link to open the contract. So one thing you can also see here is it's password protected. So if you want to generate a password protected file, which I'm assuming would be the case when it comes to these contract generation, then that's also possible. So we can also have these contracts generated, these passwords dynamically, like first name, last name, date of birth. So yeah, we can use multiple scenarios there. So now you can see that the offer is currently accessed by the candidate. So now when the candidate goes through this contract, you will see that the signature provided by the hiring manager is already here. Now the employee can look at all the different conditions, salary, all the benefit package that we talked about. Now, just like what we saw in the case of hiring manager, even with the employee, we could add multiple options here. So one would be like, hey, everything looks fine, salary looks great. So they can go ahead and accept it. If they want to, if there is any amendment required, then they could also send it back, and then it will go back to the process of amending the contract if needed. And also, uh, let's say we also have an option to decline, more often than not. As recruiters, it's also a common scenario where a candidate has accepted offer from another organization, for example. So even in those cases, the candidate has no option but to decline. But where Strato comes into picture and does the automation is, depending on the option that you choose, whether you say you accept or decline, we can automatically update the status in the recruitment pipeline in SuccessFactors as well. So that's what we could also do. So for now, in this case, let's say they say accept and resign. So this is where they can also, provide a signature. So in this case, let's say everything looks fine with this contract. So the employee can simply go ahead and save. So what's happening here right now is the contract is signed, and now the employee is happy with the contract. Everything looks okay. And two things will potentially happen here. So one is, once the contract is signed, of course, the employee would also want a copy of the contract. So what Strato automation does, or workflow to be precise, is it says, okay, hey, the contract is signed. So now that the contract is signed, take this document and then send it to the employee. So they will send a copy of that, and then what Strato will automatically do in the backend is also upload this particular contract into the candidate applicant profile. So first, let's look at the first case, which is sending the contract as the attachment to the employee. So now I will go back to the to my mailbox as the employee, and when I see here, you will see that the contract has been sent, and now the job offer has also come through as the attachment. So this way, we could also send the contract through the email. But as I said, we also have the option to send the contract, or at least directly upload the contract in the candidate pipeline. So what I'm going to do is, let me first refresh this. Um, so yeah, so what Strato is doing in the backend is it first accepts the contract. So here you see that once the candidate signed the contract, Strato automatically updated the status of the contract to accepted. So that's one thing that Strato already does. And another additional thing after the contract is signed, and that's what I was talking about, was when I go to my offers here, you will see that the offer that we just generated now is already showing up here. So this way, Strato can send documents through email, automatically update candidate status in recruitment, and also, upload document in the applicant profile. So this was one scenario that we wanted to show here. So now, looking at the time, I think we should also quickly look at some other scenarios. So the second scenario that we would want to talk about is the part about the pending data. So this is also a very common scenarios that we have seen with customers. So let's say an employee is going through a change, and that change can be a salary change, a contract change, a promotion, or a demotion. So more often than not, these changes don't just go on the fly. It would also need approval or a signature from the candidate. So that's a use case scenario that we have also seen when it comes to Employee Central. So that's what we will be seeing now. So what happens is the HR would first, initiate this change. The line manager would receive that email, and then once they receive that email, then they would review the employment variation, and then they would go ahead and approve it. Followed by that, the employee would receive the amended form or the document with this change. So as I said, this change can be a position change, which I'll show you now, or a salary increase, and then we go from there. And then finally, the notification comes to the manager, and then also the employee can finally see the stored document in the digital file. So um, let's go back to our process and see how we go through it. So in order to make things faster, I have already triggered this workflow. So this is the workflow that I was talking about. So if I simply open it, so what's happening here is, in this case, for our demo, we have the employee Catherine. Catherine is going through, or at least is moved to a different location for a different job title. The weekly hours is changed from 40 hours to 32 hours, and also with a slight salary increase. So this is the scenario that we are testing, where the change the employee is going through the Strato will pick up these details in the form, and then how the validation happens from there on is what we are going to see. So going back to our example, so now what is happening here is, let me open the workflow. So this is the one that the line manager would receive when there is a change in the employment. So now what's happening here is, the line manager would first look at the changed contract, or the changed happening for the employee. So when I open this document, I will show you what the change is that I'm talking about. So here you can see, for our employee Catherine, in the workflow that I showed, you see that there is a change coming. It's a permanent position transfer. The location changed to Berlin. So that's what I was showed you there. And if I can also show you in the workflow. So let's validate this one by one. So here you can see the important changes. The standard weekly hours are changed. So that's what's changing. So that's why you see that here. And then also the employee is going through a base salary change. So the document also clearly states what is the change of salary that's going here. So you can see that Strato has the ability to pull not only the data that is there in success factors, like uh, the stored data, but also pending data. This is definitely one of a very important, or a very most asked about feature, so to say, that customers have always been requesting. So hey, can we also pull pending data? Because some of these use case scenarios where it requires only pending data to be retrieved and approved, that becomes a crucial piece. And we briefly talked about the workers council case as well. Now, even for not just candidates, but also for the employees who are working within the organization, if there is a change happening like what we are seeing now, we could also, trigger this form that can be sent to workers council, because there are certain use cases that we have seen with the customers where they want to make sure that, hey, before this goes through, we need a approval from workers council. One another use case that I can think of is when an employee is becoming full-time to part-time, or part-time to full-time. This is again a scenario where we have seen that requires a workers council approval. So we can build those scenarios with Strato as well. So now going back to our example, I know I've been speaking a lot. So right now we'll go back to Catherine. Catherine is being promoted, or being transferred from, uh, I think, yeah, to Berlin. So let's say that, okay, the line manager sees everything is fine, and then they approve. Just like what we saw in the previous case, what Strato is doing in the back end is, okay, now that the line manager has approved, now let's send this contract to the employee. So that's what Strato is doing now. So what we can already do is we can now see that, okay, the contract is currently sent for the employee. I'll just refresh my screen just to see if the contract comes through. Yeah, so once these changes are coming, as I mentioned, then comes the part where the employee would sign the contract. So in this case, let me see, the contract's already here. And now when I open the contract, it should, again, if password protected is required, then we can also do that. But in this case, just to show that they can be password protected, we have done it. So as I said, this is the part where the employee is looking at the change in their current position with the company. So you can see the same details that we saw before, where the employee is appointed to permanent position based in Berlin, and also finally the work hours change. So once this is done, of course, the employee also has the option to accept and decline. As mentioned before, these use cases are very much, we can customize it based on your requirement. Uh, for this case, let's take the happy flow and say they accept and sign. And you can see that the signature that was done before is already saved, so you don't have to always go and sign. Strato has also the ability to save signature, so that's what it's doing here. And then they simply go ahead and send it. So this way, the employees can automatically sign these documents. And also, this is a very automated process where the change that is being done in Employee Central can automatically picked up via Strato and generate the document accordingly. So this was the second use case that we talked about. Uh, the last use case that I also wanted to briefly discuss, or at least wanted to show you, was the self-service scenario. So one thing I also wanted to show was the self-service scenario. So let me see if, yeah. So let me go back to my slide. Yes. So um, employee self-service is also one of the most common scenarios that we have seen, where right now we saw documents being dynamically generated. So either it was generated through when a change happened in Employee Central side, or when a change happened on the recruitment side. We also have employee self-service as well, where the as the name suggests, the employees can go ahead and generate a document for themselves. Just like that, we also have manager self-service if the manager wants to generate it for their team, or also for an HR if they want to generate document for the people under their areas of responsibility. So there are different use cases where we could also leverage Strato to generate documents, not just automatically, but also manually. So in this case, we would try to trigger a very simple form. So the third scenario that we would talk about is an ESS scenario. So in this case, what we will do is we will assume the role of an employee and then try to fill a form. So the forms, as the name suggests, is a bit different from document generation. So in document generation, we saw how the data is being directly pulled from success factors and then automatically populated. But in the forms, you could also think of scenarios where the employee would simply fill certain details and then send that to approval. So that is the scenario that we would go through now. So again, I'm in the SuccessFactors homepage now. So again, in order to access Strato, I would simply click on the My Documents dashboard. So this is where the widget, or at least the connection to Strato happens. So that's what you are seeing right now. So again, These workflows or these processes, to be more precise, can be grouped into different tabs. So here you have employee self-service, where the document is being generated as an employee for themselves. If you are a manager and if you want to generate document for your team, then that's also possible. If you are a HR who wants to generate documents for your people in the areas of responsibility, then that's also possible. So depending on what your scenarios are and what your processes are, we can permission them and also build them. So now what we can do is, because it's a ESS scenario, we'll take an example of an employee tuition reimbursement workflow. So I would simply click on this, and then you see the workflow is generated. So what's happening in the background is, once the workflow is generated, the employee would potentially receive an email, and then they would go through the form, in there. But also the other thing is, because it's a ESS scenario, you see there is also an option called to do list here. So that's where any pending actions that's on you is being basically seen here. So now you can see that we generated a document. Now it's already visible here. So when I click on preview, the form opens up. For this particular scenario, we have just come with a simple form. So it's a tuition reimbursement form. So that's what you will see now. So here you can see it's a semester year. So I'm just gonna say 2025 and fall, spring, and also what you notice here is there is a help text here. So that's what, if you need a help text within your form to make them understand, fill them, then that's also possible. Now, as I mentioned, it's a simple, form. So let's say I'm just gonna say it's spring of August, and I would, fill in some details. I would just say CSE. Course title is Computer Science, and hours and semester it's 100 hours and 2 semesters. GPA is 4. Again, just an example. Another additional option that you are seeing at the bottom of your screen is to upload files. So if certain forms that you fill need additional attachment, then that's also possible. So you would simply click on choose file, and then you would just, you know, upload the document there. So that's also possible. And then once the form is filled out, you simply click on submit. So this is one scenario that we would want to show you. Again, another scenario that we briefly talked about in previous use case was the workers council form. So let's say that when the offer needs to be approved, or the offer details needs to be approved by workers council, we have seen customers using or leveraging these forms where the HR, sorry, fills these details and then sends it to the workers council approval. So with that, we have completed all the three scenarios. I do see a question about the document management, so briefly storage. So let's maybe also look at that now. So if I go back to my screen here, you will see there is an option called My Files. So My Files is the one that currently contains the folder structure that we would create for any customer. So what you're seeing right now is a root folder. And again, as an employee, as a HR, or as a manager, you could also go through different folder structure. So these folder structures are, always depending on your requirement, we can build them. We also have our standard folder structure that we also inculcate, and then we build documents. So as the name suggests, depending on your use case scenario, we could, of course, put these documents in different places. So for example, if we talk about recruitment, you have your contracts, offer letters, and this is where you can also directly access your job offers. If we are talking about the tuition reimbursement form that we talked about, then that is something, or the previous use case scenario where we talked about the employment change. So that would simply go in employee documents folder, and then it would be probably sitting in employee variations because that's where those type of documents would potentially go. And these documents can, of course, be grouped in different categories so that it will also help you search these documents. So that is something that we could also do. All right. With that, we have completed all the scenarios that we wanted to talk about. I hope this was helpful. And of course, let's discuss furthermore. We also have more webinars coming up, so let's just discuss them. What are the different advantages that we have with Strato? So currently we have, the access and usability. So as I said, there is no need to be in two systems, like, hey, to generate documents, should I go to Strato and and in SuccessFactors simultaneously? We can always just be logged in one system, which is SuccessFactors, and also automatically generate documents. So that is one thing that's pretty feasible here. The other one is also the security and also the scalability and efficiency. So you saw that generating documents, even for a group of employees or single employees, things are very dynamic in nature, and it's also very quick. So that's one thing that we would want to highlight. So we've also had processes where they wanted to generate documents in bulk. So Strato also has the ability to bulk generate documents, so that's also possible there. And last but not the least, Strato is tightly integrated with SuccessFactors. So as you saw, we were able to not only generate documents through employee central workflows, we were also able to generate documents also through the recruitment pipeline. One thing that Strato also does, and we did not see in the demo, is the point where once you approve or reject a document, Strato also has the ability to automatically approve or reject the SuccessFactors workflow as well. So that is also what we have, a functionality that we have seen a lot of customers use. With that, yeah, as I mentioned, we have gone through different scenarios. We went through the offer letter. We also went through the employment change, where the employee was moving from one location to another with the pay increase. We also briefly saw how the signature works. So how the signature was able to work. And also lastly, we saw how Strato was able to move the documents to applicant profile. Also, the document management side of things. I know we kind of went through a bit quickly towards the end with the interest of time, but I hope at least the two most critical scenarios, that is the contract generation and the employed, so the employment change was a bit more clearer than the ones before. So with that, we have pretty much gone through all the questions. I know we just have a minute left. Does anyone have any questions? Let's see. I'm looking in the chat. Okay. All right. I do see a couple of questions, but I think we already answered them. Just want to be sure. Yeah. Okay. All right. So with that, thank you so much for the session. I know we kind of went a bit quickly towards the end, so apologies for that. But yeah, I hope this session was clear. Of course, you will also get the recording of this session, so you will see that. And in case you have any questions, in case you want to see more, in case you have any specific scenarios that you want to talk about, feel free to reach out to us and we can definitely go through that with you. All right. With that, thank you so much, everyone. And yeah, we will come back with more sessions. We also have additional sessions also lined up in the upcoming months. So based on your questions, we can also go through them in the upcoming sessions. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Abby. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.